binge eating disorder is really underrecognized and undertreated. I think a lot of that comes with shame and the way medical professionals frame it and treat it with intrusive surgeries or whatever, and prescribe essentially restrictive diets for people that are in a larger body, and just how harmful and damaging that is. People tend to seek treatment when there's like medical complications or severely interfering in their life, and binge eating disorder often comes along with other conditions, right? So like depression, anxiety, generally that's what people will present for, and that's what gets treated, and the binge eating disorder doesn't necessarily get recognized.
Today, I am pleased to introduce my guest, Sandi James. Sandi James is a registered psychologist and certified eating disorder recovery coach with more than 15 years working in mental health, eating disorder, and addiction treatment. She is a lived experience clinician and dedicates her career to working with clients that feel let down by current systems of care and treatment approaches. Her primary focus includes mental health and trauma recovery, with a particular focus on co-occurring presentations, including substance use or food and compulsive exercise related difficulties. Sandi has extensive experience working with individuals and families to heal and recover from trauma, addictions, eating disorders, and mental health conditions. She is dedicated to working with clients and families from an inclusive and person-centered approach to improve quality of life from a harm reduction perspective. She's a passionate and committed clinician working alongside and guiding clients in the recovery process. Sandi is building a practice integrating joyful movement and somatic healing approaches to treatment, as well as working towards her PhD, conducting qualitative research, looking at experiences of eating disorder treatment, identifying, responding to, and addressing harm experienced throughout the treatment process. Without further ado, Sandi James. Woo! Thank you so much for being
Hi,
here, Sandi.
welcome. Thank you for asking me.
Of course. I'm delighted to have you here. So, just to start off, can you just introduce yourself a little bit more? Talk about your very compelling story, whatever you feel comfortable in sharing.
So I'm Sandy. I'm currently in Australia after having to come back in the post-COVID kind of situation. I work in eating disorders. My PhD research is looking at treatment trauma or harm that happens during treatment for an eating disorder. And so I'm a psychologist, like that will all be in the bio. So blah, blah, blah. I like surfing. I am a scuba diver, which is my favorite thing to do, but it's too cold here to do that. I cannot cope. I think I was spoilt in Malaysia for, like, I lived in Malaysia for 8 years as well. So the water temperature over there is fabulous, and here, no, I don't like it. So I'm trying to figure out that. Maybe I'll get like a dry suit or something. But I like my primary area of work is with people that really been let down by the current systems of care. So people that get kicked out of therapy or like dumped from treatment providers because they're not making progress fast enough, or they're not making progress at all, or they're labeled as like treatment resistant, untreatable, blah, 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 all of those kind of really damaging terms. So that's my particular interest. So I don't select anything really easy for myself.
Do you have any stats related to how many people suffer from binge eating, like for 10 years, 20 years, or more?
I tried to actually look that up specifically. There's no stats on that particularly. The binge eating disorder is really underrecognized and undertreated. I think a lot of that comes with shame and the way medical professionals frame it and treat it with intrusive surgeries or whatever, and prescribe essentially restrictive diets for people that are in a larger body, and just how harmful and damaging that is. So there's actually not a lot of there's not a lot of reliable statistics on the occurrence of binge eating, and like really any eating disorder. I think if people tend to seek treatment when there's like medical complications or severely interfering in their life, and binge eating disorder often comes along with other conditions, right? So like depression, anxiety, whatever, and generally that's what people will present for, and that's what gets treated, and the binge eating disorder doesn't necessarily get recognized in the way that it needs to. Because there are some really effective treatments, and we don't access them if we don't know what's happening, right?
Right. Well, I'm imagining a lot of times with these recalcitrant conditions, it's like, people who are motivated to seek treatment, maybe it is new or they just have newly resolved that they want to fix something. But then I can imagine after a while, if they've been dealing with this stuff or working with a therapist or something for a long time, they just become disillusioned. If it's been 30 years, they might just be like, fuck it, I'm not going to work with anyone. What they are giving me is not helping me. So they're hidden from being researched because they're not seeking treatment.
Yeah, and the research generally tends, like the majority of the research is on anorexia nervosa, and
Mm-hmm.
there's lots of reasons for that, and it's not helpful. So I try and fill into that void where, because people also often get blamed for like the treatment is not working and it's their fault. That's really harmful, right? That's when people completely withdraw from getting any help because they're blamed for whatever is happening. And I tend to approach it from a different angle, and that's part of what my research is about, is trying to find individualized approaches that will heal the whole person, not just focus on a specific label.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that is really healing for both parties to not blame the victim. Like, oh, this this one size fits all formula doesn't work for you, so something must be wrong with you, as opposed to being like, how can we both take responsibility, work together to find and to co-create something that might be helpful.
Yeah, and also like the therapist or the clinician, whoever that is, like being transparent and also being aware of their own internal biases. And all eating disorders are restrictive disorders, right? So thinking about how that actually plays into it as well when it's not considered that way, and providing treatment that is not focused on weight loss necessarily. Like that may be a side effect of treatment, but not having that as the only goal, because that's not going to fix the problem that's happening.
You're really focusing on supporting people in, acknowledging the trauma of having an eating disorder and not being supported and all that sort of thing. But do you have initial insights regarding ways of treating someone who's had an eating disorder for so long? Like, is there anything different about treating someone who has a severe and enduring eating disorder versus someone who has maybe just had it for a year or a few years?
Yeah, there is, because generally, like the longer you've had a condition, the more impact it's had on your life, and the more your mood will be impacted, or other things start to come into play. And I'm really transparent in how I work with people. I walk alongside them. I'm not like, I don't know everything for anybody. I don't even know everything for me. So it's about both of us like kind of discovering the path together and trying things, like trying to go, okay, if this doesn't work, then we can try like all these other things as well. It doesn't mean that you're failing. It just means that that particular approach is not the one that's for you. So let's try something else. And really meeting the person where they're at. So a harm reduction, harm minimization approach, and making small changes rather than kind of throwing someone off the cliff and expecting them to do really hard things really quickly without distress tolerance skills, or like if you bring dissociation into play, then that adds a different level to it. And how can we get some resolution with that so that we can prevent the impact of the other thing that's happening at that time, right? So
Yeah, definitely. Providing resources. And it sounds to me like, honestly, just even the way that you show up for the people is enormously helpful, like by demonstrating an attitude of perseverance and being open, being creative and cooperative. Like you're not saying, oh, I have all the answers, but by you being like, hey, can we be open in trying these different things. If this doesn't work, then can we be open to trying something else? And I think that that is an amazing attitude, as opposed to being like, oh fuck, that didn't work, like nothing's gonna work or whatever, but just to kind of continuing to have like this open attitude with compassion and curiosity, like how about this? Could this work? What about that? I think that that sounds like that in and of itself, just your relationship to that person and being supportive sounds like it could be extremely valuable.
Yeah, totally. And um, I bring my lived experience into it as well. So like I have a lived experience of eating disorder, substance use disorder, trauma, blah blah blah. Like kind of pretty much. I've had a eventful life so far, and kind of hope it stays eventful, but in a slightly different tangent, right? So I do talk about my lived experience when it's appropriate as well, and when I think about my journey to healing, it took me probably more than 15 years to actually get to a point where I thought I was kind of got my shit together a bit. And then COVID hit, and I realized I didn't actually have my shit together as much as I thought I did, and sort of have had to go back into treatment and sort out some other things. So it's been a fun journey, and learning that self-compassion piece, right? Like going, actually, like the recurrence of my illness was not my fault. It was the extreme circumstances that I was in at the time, and I survived it. So that kind of goes in my favor, right? Like as long as you're still breathing, then we have hope. It's kind of my motto.
My journey was so long too. Like mine was over, I mean, I think all the things that we live through, like we're always building and trying. I'm sure that even when you were younger, you're on the journey. I know that I was ever since I was young and in my teens and my 20s and always kind of like on my journey. But then that was kind of like the basis of all my stuff. But I feel like my journey has been 20 plus years in the making. And I had a similar, somewhat similar experience to you. COVID really fucked me up. I mean, that wasn't the only thing, but there was a lot of things in 2020, and like that was a very transformative year for me. It was like the worst year of my life, because of COVID and because of, my mom died, and my eating disorders out of control and all these other things. But then that helped me to really shift things and increase my self compassion. And I felt like I had a real shift. Then I felt unstable again, but it's like we're constantly learning by what we grow, growing through by what we go through. So, yeah, we go through some stuff, but then we were able to come out with, ideally we come out with more learning and lessons, and then we can help others through that.
Yeah, and being able to, like I thought I'd resolved a heap of stuff that resurfaced during COVID because I got stuck in the UK, right? So that abandonment piece and all of that stuff really, I don't remember a lot of 2020 purely because I was in survival mode. But as I started, 2021 was really when things started to shift for me, was when I was able to get out of the UK and find somewhere a little bit stable. It took a long time to get actually stable, but it wasn't COVID. I haven't had COVID as far as I know. Like I haven't actually. So it wasn't COVID. It was the world closing in
Right.
response
Yeah,
to
no, me
COVID.
too. Same.
Fucked
Yeah, it wasn't
everything. Yeah.
my, yeah, me too. I didn't get COVID. It was just like the unprecedented fear mongering and the terror and the uncertainty and the borders closing and all that was so scary. The isolation and all
Yeah.
of that was
My
just
partner
really
got stuck in
horrible.
a different country to me, so
Ugh.
that isolation, like I was homeless. I had a suitcase full of, I went to the UK for a conference. So I had 8 months worth of living out of a suitcase that I packed to go to a conference, right? So clothing was not necessarily appropriate for that length of time being there when the
Right.
weather changed. And, I've mentioned how much I love the cold. Yeah, not ideal.
You've gone through a lot.
I can look back on it now and I'm starting to reflect. Like I've got a lot of photographs that come back in to my phone here and there, and remembering like actually some of the things that I did do were pretty awesome. Like I walked the countryside of um, Ireland outside of Belfast for months. Like I was staying with someone in their house, and it was in the middle of fuck ass nowhere, and the shop was like 6 miles away. So to get to the shop, I had to walk. So that was what I did with my days. I just walked I walked to the coastline, which I think was about 7 miles. So it would take me all day, you know. I met some really cool horses. I found a sheep with a yellow bucket on its head, like just some really
Wow.
weird stuff as well. I took a photo of the sheep and people are like, "Did you help it?" And that didn't occur to me that it was stuck. The front was open so it could breathe and
Okay.
whatever.
Okay.
And I just thought it was like, when you put a bucket on your dog's head,
Mm-hmm.
my
Mm-hmm.
brain just assumed that it was there for a reason, and I took a photo and kept
Yeah.
going. So
It might have been
anyway,
his style. He might have liked it.
I think so. And sheep
Yeah.
are not my style, so I was also way too
Okay.
scared to step
Yeah.
inside the fence.
Right. I understand that you are an expert when it comes to dissociation and eating disorders. And I have been really intrigued with that. And in my graduate school, I've been doing research on dissociation. And then specifically in my dissertation, I was doing research on dissociation, particularly as it relates to binge based behaviors. And there's really not a lot. And I was wondering if you could fill us in on your perspective on dissociation. Do you perceive it as a spectrum that everyone engages in, or do you only perceive dissociation to be like a really diagnosable condition? And just start with that.
I'm probably far from an expert. I'm developing some
Okay,
expertise. Let's go with
great.
that.
Okay,
Um, but it's definitely a spectrum, and the diagnosable end is the more kind of severe end, right, where it has a greater impact than it. So you could like go into dissociative identity disorder and OSDD and those kind of diagnoses, and it's also very under-recognized and undiagnosed or misdiagnosed a lot of the time. But with eating disorders, sometimes it's helpful for some eating disorders. So, like with anorexia nervosa, for example, dissociating when you're doing something really hard in the early stages can be really helpful to get some uh, nutritional rehabilitation in place and stuff like that. With binge eating disorder, though, it tends to be harmful because people lose choice over their actions and their behaviors, and that has a lot of impact as well. So initially, I think identifying what type of dissociation is happening, um, whether it's something that we need to address initially or whether we get some insight into that and how to navigate that. So there's heaps of different ways that you can do that. If I was working with someone, so because it also happens in substance use disorder, right? Like when I was active in my substance use, I would go to treatment, whatever, and then I'd get clean. But then at some point, something would happen and I'd find myself back at the dealer's house, not having any recollection of making that choice or going there. So that's when it became harmful, and I needed to work out how to manage that in a way that helped me to stop doing that behavior. And I think it's the same with binge eating disorder, right? So if you're not in control of your actions, how can we get some management of the dissociation so that you're then able to make choices?
absolutely. I remember for me, I didn't even know that that's what was going on with me. I just knew that it was just kind of like I didn't know what was happening. I'd set an intention, I'm not going to binge, and then later on it's like I did it again, and that would happen like every fucking day. And then I remember I was talking to a therapist about it, and she was the one who's like, that sounds like dissociation. She was not an eating disorder therapist, but she's like, that sounds like dissociation. And then I looked into it and I was like, that's exactly what it is. And since then, I've been working to, be able to counter that really. And like I said, I've been exploring this on an academic level as well, like trying to see what the research says, but it is a very difficult topic to research because it evades it evades inquiry. I did my dissertation study on binge eating, and obviously it has dissociative elements, but one of the challenges for my study is gathering the data because I want people to talk about, for example, the intensity of the urge to binge. And I'm asking them to use an app to rate the intensity of the urge. But it's kind of like this challenge because like if you have a really strong urge to binge, they're probably experiencing this dissociative pull as well. The request to input something in an app is asking them to be present and to be mindful and to rate something. So there's kind of like these two things can't exist at the same time. You're either turning on the light, turning off the light. It's kind of like, how do you do this? If I'm asking you to input data, then I'm disrupting the dissociative state that would otherwise be.
Which is probably also helpful for treatment, right? Like that would
Yeah.
be if I'm working with someone like with dissociative identity disorder, we have like the treatment is different, but with someone that is at the other spectrum with the dissociation,
Mm-hmm.
working out like, okay, so what are the vulnerability factors that can lead to this? What are your triggers, for want of a better word? Like what's happening in the lead up, and how can we identify that this is going to happen and put something in place to kind of keep you present and keep you in the moment so that you can then make choices.
Yeah, a lot of what I was researching was the importance of prevention, not waiting too long. If you're waiting till you're already dissociated, you're pretty screwed, like to really do it in advance and set measures ahead of time. Can you talk a little bit more about how can you identify like a vulnerable time and like, take steps to help to prevent dissociation, or what are some steps that we can take to help us to, if we're finding that we're slightly dissociating or that we know that we're going to have a difficult time, do you have certain practices or tips or tools that you recommend?
Yeah, I it's pretty individual, but generally I'll look at um, like the Maslow's hierarchy thing, where
Mm-hmm.
it's got like the
Mm-hmm.
foundation. So we look at all of
Yeah.
those first. So what's your sleep look like? What's the rest of your day looking like nutritionally? Is it balanced? Are you able to get any movement in? Over time, we kind of build a picture of when dissociation is more likely, and from there we go, okay, so these are the vulnerability factors. So it kind of really comes from DBT, the chain analysis. So working with someone initially to go, okay, this happened last night. Tell me about the 2 days prior to that. Okay, tell me what happened. How was your sleep? How was all of that stuff? And then we start to put together a picture for that person and go, okay, so when this is happening, this is more likely to happen. So when this is happening, then we will go for a walk, look out the window, do some breathing, smell the roses, like all of those kind of mindfulness and grounding strategies that some people really don't like grounding. And I think it's also about finding, like, it might be a cold shower, it might be a hot shower, it might be a bath, it might be a cup of tea, like whatever is going to work for that person to help them stay in the moment and be able to make choices. Sometimes it's just physically leaving the environment where, if you are going to dissociate, how can we put some things in place to stop access so that you're not going to binge, or like those kind of practices.
Do you find that you were talking about different strategies, like some people don't like certain ones. A lot of the ones that you mentioned involve the senses, looking out the window, taking a walk, a cold shower, or a hot bath. Is it always dependent on the senses in your experience? Are those the most effective?
Yeah, that in my experience, they're the most effective because dissociation happens in the mind, right? So we need to get out of that place to be able to, like, that embodied kind of thing. And I know that the body is often a source of significant discomfort. I think about, I've got a view of trees out the back of my house, and sometimes I just sit here and look at them. I don't have to do anything, and I don't have to be in my body. I can, like, in my mind, send myself out.
Mm, Mhm.
into the
Mhm.
trees. Like I'll try and spot a bird, like, or a new flower that's like something. I get people sometimes to look around the room and see if they can notice something small that they've not noticed for a while. Just really trying to hone in on like, okay, let's get the working memory in the frontal cortex happening. So it might be a game on your phone even, or
Yeah, I for urges to binge, some theories suggest that a lot of what's happening is that there's an elaboration in the brain, like working memory is like, how am I going to get the food, and what is it going to taste like, and what's going to smell like, and what's the sound of the crunch in my mouth, and what, how am I going to get it back to the house and keep it a secret and stuff like that. So there's all this elaboration going on, and if we can interrupt it with even as something as like a Tetris game or something like that, we can actually disturb that elaboration. And my personal favorite thing to counter dissociation is proprioception, because literally it's like, I find with me, I when I start to feel the urge to binge, it's like I'm not existing in my body. And then to actually, do something that can appropriate something proprioceptive that actually reminds me that I'm in my body, and that these are the these are the boundaries of my body. I have a body and it exists. Like, this helps me know that I'm not in la la land, and it kind of brings me back here. So proprioception is my favorite way to counter dissociation. Personally, I find it very powerful.
it can be like you know, touching the grass as well. Like you can like
Yes.
using external things. Juggling is an incredible thing to like because you can't do anything else if you're juggling really.
No.
So like little like they can be fun. I've taught so many people how to juggle, and I'm not actually very good at juggling, so it's kind of funny. But also like riding a unicycle, I've got a unicycle that I used to ride a lot, and I don't ride it very much anymore. And I haven't even put it together since I came back to Australia. But doing doing other things like that to remember the boundaries of what's possible, and if you bring fun into it as well, then it really makes you go like, "Okay, life is okay, like, life is gonna be okay. It's okay to do this stuff," and, like, even just, like, noticing your feet on the ground, right? So, what's the surface under my feet, or picking up a rock and
Yeah, I like shaking, like kind of like shaking my body, like shaking my hands, or like shaking my feet, or like shaking my rump and all that stuff. And that, I think that invites in a playful spirit, because we can do sensory strategies and kind of like take it very seriously, like, hey, we're going to change our physiological state, but then I think that if we could do things like, having a little dance party, or going outside and basking in the sunshine, or doing these sort of things, they also engage the senses, and can bring us back to the present moment and bring us back to our body. But it can also invite in like a lightheartedness that I think can also help help change our state and bring levity in to an otherwise, sort of like serious or dark situation, like experiencing, having an eating disorder, or experiencing compulsions, can feel like, maybe like something's wrong with us, or can feel like really defeating or frustrating. Like, what the fuck? Like, why the fuck did this have to keep on happening, or something? But if we can like just be like, get away, not today, Satan, or something, just
I'm
like
gonna
shake it out, or
play
do, yeah, did like
playing
play
on
it out, it makes
swings,
it,
you know?
uh-huh, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it does the
if that's
same, but it bites
accessible,
in
so
play. Right, right, exactly. I believe I saw on your bio that you also are really into incorporating joyful elements and, embodiment. So it sounds like we don't have to do like a certain meditation practice to be embodied. We can do it by being in the ocean. We can be on a swing. Like, what are other sort of, do you have any ideas on other joyful ways that we can incorporate movement to
and I have
be
so
embodied?
many, so
Okay,
many things.
give me
Like,
three.
I am a really big water-based, water is where it's my element. If I could figure out how to live in the water, then I'd be, like, blissful forever. I can't quite figure out how to do that, but, Like things like kayaking, stand-up paddleboarding, stuff like that for people with accessibility challenges. Like locally, we've got a beach with like a pathway down to the water. So if you can't walk in the sand or you can't walk, then you can get a chair and still be able to put your feet and your body in the water, um, despite some of those other difficulties that might come in play. Stand-up paddleboarding is awesome because you can sit on the board as well. Like it's also hilarious because it's hard to balance, right? So a lot of them are movement based for me, just because that's my preference. But like there are adaptive, accessible options of most of those for everyone if if you're looking in the right places. Like you can do skateboarding. It's not really skateboarding, it's like a tricycle, right? So you can do that and you don't have to stand up and you don't have to have really good balance to be able to do it. And there's adaptive surfing and there's adaptive, like where people will surf on their backside. Things like bodyboarding or even on a lilo, like one of those blow up things that I used to play with when I was a kid. It's like a little blow up mattress, but anything that makes your heart sing, I think, is perfect. Doesn't really matter what it looks like.
But I mean, I think that's wonderful if you can just find the things that you love, like that you love being in the water, you love scuba, surfing, all that stuff. Like that's your happy place, and for you to know that is powerful. You know, for me, I love dancing. For me, time stands still. Like I can have a million cares. I have like so much stress, and then I just go out and dance, and I'm just like got this shitty grin on my face, and it's just like nothing else matters, you know. So I feel lucky that I love dancing because I love that, and not
It's a
everyone
bit more
does.
accessible than water stuff, right? Like I don't I'm not I don't make a lot of noise. Like I'm not big on noise making stuff.
Uh huh.
But I was just thinking about dancing and even doing things like drumming and
Yeah.
music, stuff like that.
Yeah, I love drumming. I wish I was better. I want to take if I could be like a professional musician, or if I could be really good at any instrument, I would choose like the cajon. I feel like the do you know the cajon? It literally is just a box, but you just like you sit on it and you can use both hands, and you
Oh,
just like you knock
yeah.
on it and slap it different parts. It makes a really unique and versatile sounds. I would like to be good at anything percussion, like tabla or congas or cajon. I feel like I'm a musician inside, but I actually don't really play any instrument. But in my soul, I'm a musician. So I just have to
I used
learn
to
so
play
that.
the djembe,
Oh,
um,
cool.
but also not very good, and I'm super uncoordinated, so music is
Okay.
really challenging for me. Surfing is also
So,
super challenging. Like I'm terrible at it, but I love it, and because I grew up in the ocean, like I learnt to swim before I can even remember, so I have no fear, which is it's beneficial. Sometimes it scares a lot of people because I do things that may be a little bit out of my skill level, let's say. So I get trashed in the waves quite often
oh
because I'll
goodness.
try and catch a big wave and then I'm like, oh, actually, I don't know how to do this. That's right.
Another one thing that we do have in common is that we love art. We recently found that out that we both love art. Can you talk a little bit about your favorite mediums and how that might have helped you in your recovery?
At the moment, I'm doing wood carving. So that's, I need some new tools because my tools have gotten blunt and I
Mm.
want to replace them anyway. They're old. But I've just kind of recently got back into doing that. I do it on flat board and then I can make prints from it. But the other thing, like, I've got paintings and stuff behind me. I like uh, textured art. So if I'm using acrylic paint, I'll put mediums in it to make it more behave
Mm-hmm.
more like an oil. And so they're the things. I've done etching before, which I didn't really like because it's a little bit too precise. Photography is awesome and super accessible. So like noticing, and it also, I think, like with photography, anyone can do it, like with their phone or whatever, and it gets your brain to start noticing the world around you. So you're looking outwards and looking for things that are pretty or worth taking a photograph of rather than staying trapped in you.
I found that doing art has been sort of like we're talking about being in the present moment and how that is really important in countering dissociation and just finding joy. And for me, I find that just painting brings me that. Like if I'm like by myself waiting for my boyfriend to come home or something, and I'm like maybe before I would have just automatically gone for the binge or like gone to the store or whatever. Now I'm just like, I'm just going to go and work on my art. And I just find it so entertaining and like comforting, or just there's something that kind of brings me into the moment. And like, you're not just like scrolling and feeling jealous of other people or something like that. You're just kind of like, just feels sort of like, it feels inspiring. And
Like it's playful.
yeah, yeah, there's just something that feels, yeah, like I can be with this moment. Like just being here and just messing around with art just feels like enjoyable, even if it's shit or whatever. It's just like I'm enjoying I enjoy the process.
Yeah, I like seeing a painting. Um, I don't have a studio in this house. It's a rental, and I'm not like I'm super like I'm uncoordinated and really messy. So I'm trying to figure out how to do that, and that was where the wood carving came back in because it's not messy, tad dangerous, but that's also part of my personality, right?
That's you. You
Um,
like danger, a little bit of danger in
yeah,
life.
and the other thing, the other thing that I've actually really gotten into recently is writing. Like I write a lot. I just found out the other day that in about 2 weeks, I think, one of my pieces that I wrote a while ago is being published in a magazine called Asylum. I think it's from
Oh,
the UK,
congrats.
and
Wow.
it's called Anxiety Octopus, and I wrote it when I had a panic attack and how I managed. Like it really described how I worked through the panic and was able to bring myself out of it. So yeah, that's fun.
That's wonderful. You're so creative.
Yeah, I am, and it keeps me entertained because I get bored otherwise, and if I'm bored, then life becomes not worth living. So I like doing new things, and I like playing, and I like putting myself out there and taking on challenges, which I never did for a really long time. Like I just hid in the world of an eating disorder or substance use or whatever.
You have a lot going on. You have all your artistic endeavors, you have your life, you have your work, you have your PhD. 'Cause I was going to say, what's next? But I think all of those are very hefty projects. You don't need anything next. All of those are great.
I don't know what's next because I'm presenting at a couple of conferences next year. Um, the PhD, I'm back at the beginning again, so I'm only 12 months in. COVID also destroyed my first PhD project, so I've had to restart. Um, so that's new-ish. Interviews should be starting next year. Um, so that's all happening. Surfing is new and horribly hard, and I love it. So that I love traveling. I love watching TV, so I always make time to just sit and chill, watch TV. And I don't know what's next. I think probably when I finish my PhD, I'll probably move countries again just for fun, like I don't really know how long I'll stay back in Australia because I still am struggling with being in a country that abandoned me, and that makes it really hard to feel safe and calm here, which is where all those other things kind of come in, right? So
If people want to follow you and yeah, get in touch with you, all the things, what is the best way?
on my website kind of has everything. It's got my Instagram stuff. I'm also on Substack now. I have to update my website, which is something I have to get someone else to do because I cannot figure out how to do it. But in there, and there's also a thing where you can contact, like there's a contact box thingy. Yeah. Yeah.
It has been so great to have you, Sandi. I am so grateful that you came on to for you to share your wisdom, your personality, your perspectives. If you do come to San Diego, then I hope to meet you then.
100%. I will be coming to San Diego,
Okay,
so
okay,
I'll let
okay.
you know. We can
Great.
go play.
Yes, yeah, I
Yeah.
would be down to play, and I'll play in the ocean with you.
Sweet. There's ocean in San Diego. Is there?
Yes, there's
Oh,
tons.
fuck.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's actually what it's known. That's actually what it's known for.
Damn, I didn't
That's
know that.
yeah,
I need. Okay,
yeah.
so I need. Like, I need to look more on Google Maps, I think.
Oh yeah, everywhere there's oceans. There's lots of different beaches, and I might have some friends that could lend you some
Oh,
surfboards
that's
and
right.
stuff
San
like
Diego.
that.
Yes.
So yeah, yeah, cool. Well, thank you so much.